President of the Council, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the Sustainable Development Goal 4 aspires to achieve inclusive and quality education for all. While indicators appear to show the completion rates for primary and secondary schools are rising worldwide, persons with albinism are still among those who are furthest left behind in terms of realization of the right to education. Mr. President, I welcome this opportunity to present to you my report on the right to education for persons with albinism. As many of you know, persons with albinism are also persons with disabilities owing to their visual impairment and a high susceptibility to skin cancer due to a lack of or an absence of melanin. Although the right to education is a fundamental right that is protected under key international human rights frameworks, including the UDHR, ICESCA, and the CRPD, my report highlights that persons with albinism are severely hindered in accessing their right by a multitude of barriers. These include exclusion from school. These include exclusion from school curricula, sports and higher education, lack of reasonable accommodation, including assistive devices, or challenges in obtaining these, hurdles in traveling to school due to inaccessible transport systems, fear of attacks, or fear of harsh exposure to the sun without appropriate skin protection. Pervasive stigma and discrimination and rampant bullying, which appears to exist in many regions that I reviewed. In relation to bullying, I was deeply saddened to note that a number of persons with albinism reported insensitive comments from educators that could amount to bullying. Mr. President, I would like to emphasize that the barriers to accessing education are not only evident in Africa or low-income countries, but in all regions throughout the globe, regardless of the GDP of the state. What appears to differ in some cases is the manifestation of this barrier. For example, while those with albinism in low-income countries generally do not receive assistive devices or receive devices which may not be appropriate for their needs, such as braille writers, those in higher income countries often struggle to navigate the social protection systems which should enable them to obtain these and therefore do not receive them or have delayed access to them. It is essential to note that a delay in receiving assistive devices leads to students falling behind and perhaps even having to drop certain subjects. It is also essential to note that reasonable accommodations must also be provided in relation to vulnerability to the sun and not just low visual acuity. My report also provides examples of good practices instituted by states and civil society organizations. These include raising awareness among educators about the needs of persons with albinism, reasonable accommodations in class and during exams, including extra time for learners with albinism, campaigns to minimize the risk of skin cancer for learners, establishing partnerships between states and CSOs to distribute sunscreen and magnifiers within education settings, and mentorship programs and scholarships for learners with albinism. Notwithstanding these good practices, there is still a long way to go to effectively realizing the right to education for persons with albinism. My report provides a number of recommendations that can be replicated by states and stakeholders in this endeavor. In implementing these, states must make sure that measures adopted take into account the maximum available resources of the country and the individual requirements as required by international human rights laws. I now turn to my report on my visit to Panama, which I conducted on 28 August to 7 September 2023. I thank the government of Panama for their invitation and for its positive cooperation in facilitating my visit. I was accorded the opportunity to meet with persons with albinism from the Guna indigenous peoples in Panama City and the islands of Naitupu and Rio Sidra. The Guna people have one of the biggest prevalence of albinism in the world. While globally the prevalence of albinism can range from 1 in 14,000 to 1 in 17,000, the Guna communities have a prevalence of around 1 in 167. In its efforts to address the needs of persons with albinism, the government of Panama took the considerable initiative to adopt Law 210 of 2021, specifically focusing on addressing the challenges of persons with albinism. Law 210 includes a series of positive stipulations that, once implemented, can truly contribute to enhancing the human rights situation of persons with albinism in the country. It addresses non-discrimination and inclusion, challenges related to health, education, employment, and social protection, as well as the need to collect data on persons with albinism and the commemoration of 13 June as National Albinism Awareness Day. However, while Law 210 is a significant beacon of hope, challenges remain, including the need to raise awareness of albinism, including in groups other than the Guna. The need to combat discrimination and pervasive bullying, particularly of children and learners with albinism, to expand and regularize the provision of free quality sunscreen to the Kuna communities who are regularly exposed to harsh sunlight, and also to tackle the impact of climate change, which has threatened the livelihood and homes of those who reside in the Kuna Islands. I underscore that the adoption of the regulations for Law 210 is imperative to translating its stipulations into concrete results. I therefore reiterate the call to authorities to expedite implementation of Law 10 in this regard. I remain available to assist and provide support to the Panamanian authorities and all stakeholders where needed, and I look forward to ongoing cooperation to ensure that my recommendations are implemented. I thank you all for your attention.